Here at Futo, we believe in tech freedom, but this means a lot more than simply giving you software that are alternatives to Google's malware that you could put on your Android phone. We also believe in all types of tech freedom, and there is no person who needs tech freedom more so than people in the abilities community. One of the recipients of a Futo grant recently from Aaron Wolf was Mr. Thomas Queter. Thomas Queter now runs the Mobility Independence Foundation after providing funding to his nonprofit, similar to how Aaron provided funding to mine. Thomas Queter believes that everybody, regardless of their abilities, should have the freedom to get around, should have the freedom to be able to leave their own home, to be able to live a normal life like anybody else in spite of their abilities, regardless of whether they have been in a car accident that has ruptured their spinal cord, or somebody who has had to have an amputation as a result of a serious injury, or simply somebody who was born with a disability. He believes that they should be as able as anybody else. And unfortunately, there are forces that work within the industry of ability-related devices, such as wheelchairs and walkers, that make it close to impossible for many people to lead a normal life. His goal is to create open-source wheelchair designs that allow anybody, regardless of their situation, to be able to have a device that they can get fixed in days, rather than waiting 3 to 6 months to get something as simple as a power button from the manufacturer. Further, he wants you to have devices that actually allow you to live your life, to not have to live in fear of a curb that's 1 or 2 inches over being ADA compliant. He wants people to be able to better live their life through having freedom over their tech. And that's part of our mission here, so we're happy to fund him. I'm going to be showing you some clips from the Houston Abilities Expo that he invited me to. I was humbled, honored, and excited to be able to be there and talk to so many people to get a little bit of insight into their world. I think that Thomas's passion for what he does is going to absolutely shine through here. His dedication to ensuring that everybody in his world is able to have the same freedom as people in mine. His passion for devices that are well designed. His passion for people to be treated with respect, dignity, and to have the same level of freedom that we want people to have here with their software. Whether we're talking about programs like Futo Keyboard and Image that allow you to have sovereignty over your personal data, or we're talking about Thomas Queter's projects which allow you to have sovereignty over your life. We believe in tech freedom in every way, shape, and form. And I hope you enjoy this video coming up as much as I enjoyed going to the Abilities Expo in Houston and being shown around and given a tour by Mr. Thomas Queter. In the beginning, I'm going to be showing you just a few minutes of just clips so you can kind of get an idea what's going on. And then after that, I'm going to show you the full expo of us walking around and just talking to people and getting a little bit of insight, not just into their world, but also into how Thomas's nonprofit is going to be able to improve their world for the better. I hope you enjoy.
Look at the front of this chair. You see that orange spring?
Yeah.
Is there anywhere for that spring to go? Is there any travel in that spring? But look, it's already compressed. What you see is that there's not going to be any more compression left. How is that going to absorb any shock? I'm going to show you something. So we talk about stability, right? The frame on this actuates, right? You're going to want to walk around the chair after I get my wheel up on this.
This is built for actual freedom.
Yes. The solution does not have to be forcing everybody to make their property accessible. The solution has to be technology that doesn't have to worry about accessibility. We are creating a competing supply chain. So the reality is that when we design this tech, we need to actually think about it from the perspective of those who use it and not from those who are trying to solve a problem they don't understand. Right. So I'm a disabilities advocate for 26 years now, and what I hear most often from people is, I'd like to be able to leave my home. So
you have high standards, sir.
I do, because I believe in being active and living a life.
And you should have high standards.
Everyone should. Look at the front of this chair. You see that orange spring?
Yeah.
Is there anywhere for that spring to go? Is there any travel in that spring? Yeah, but look, it's already compressed. What you see is that there's not going to be any more compression left. How is that going to absorb any shock?
All of your designs that you make, any of this open source stuff, all of this is going to be kept in mind even for the more affordable models?
Yeah.
Like it all has to be freedom-based. I need to be able to get around. I need to be able to get over these bumps in the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Where does open source wheelchairs come into play to try and fix these problems?
Yeah, it's a necessity. It's at its worst if it's just only being able to be repaired at one location, and that's the individual selling it. That monopoly, if they're the only ones that can fix it.
Cronyism.
Yeah, cronyism.
So is the idea here, I want the ability to pay for this repair and for it to be affordable. So like if my power button dies, instead of having to wait 6 months to go through Medicare, if this is open source, I can buy a power button.
A lot of it stems from, as a community, we're not together, right? And if we can get together and then we can agree on that, we can start making the demands more into the individuals providing these products to make it accessible to us to repair ourselves. Just like you said, it does take 6 to 8 weeks because you can only use this one company to fix your chair. But there's other people that are qualified and able to fix it in a week. So now instead of being 6 weeks or 8 weeks down because you're waiting, things could happen quicker, faster, and cheaper.
Really glad to be helping Tom have the resources he needs to, do what needs to be done for these mobility devices. Like, it's probably not cheap doing what he does, so this is like a good use of money.
We're well underway with the Mobility Independence Foundation. We've got our first design for a modular and powerful multi-terrain power wheelchair, the Endurance, capable both indoors and outdoors and giving people their independence for their backyards and their family picnics, the things that all people want to do. And, if it weren't for the donation from Aaron Wolf, we wouldn't be where we are. We wouldn't have 3 universities undertaking open source projects to benefit humanity. The University of Rochester is working on our seating system. The Rochester Institute of Technology is working on our web portal to network nonprofits. And the Northeastern University wants to do our manual chair design. And with these, we can facilitate changing the way we think about healthcare so that it's more than just sitting in your home, not doing anything. A lot of people waste away. The rules under our healthcare system tend to facilitate the lack of provision, and we believe that providing for those with disabilities is important. And I like to say that the best way to include those with disabilities is to endow them with what they need to include themselves. So we're mostly interested in user experiences. And what we're finding when we talk to people in wheelchairs is are you familiar with what's colloquially called the in-home rule?
For Medicare?
Medicare, Medicaid?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what it means?
Well, yeah, they have to use their wheelchair. They're only going to fund a wheelchair while they're in their home.
Right.
Right, so outdoor use is not.
Right.
I worked for a vendor prior, so
Yeah.
I played the insurance game for about 6 years.
It's fun, isn't it?
It's so much fun.
I have a question for you because I'm a complete newbie to all of this. I'm just I'm a wannabe philanthropist. So when it comes to this, when they say they don't cover it for outdoor use, how does that work with regards to getting food, living your life, all that kind of stuff?
So if the way that typically Medicare and Medicaid will word things is that if it's not medically important, then it doesn't matter, truthfully. So if you have, say a client requires a caregiver, or if somebody lives with them, then why would they need to leave the home?
Okay. So their idea is there is no need for anybody who's less able to have any sort of independence or autonomy.
I mean, that's how I feel. Truthfully, they probably wouldn't word it like that, but I think that's how they approve wheelchairs.
I work in totally different element of the repair industry, and they have their own particular vocabulary to dress that stuff up and make it sound look good. Well, what wording would they use to try and make that sound good?
For a denial, typically you'll see a denial based on let me think of the phrasing that I've heard in the past, because I've had denials for this reason. There's no medically driven or medically important reason for the client to use for community use.
So the problem from my perspective as an advocate of 26 years is, when you gain a disability, you still have to parent your children.
Absolutely.
You still have to provide for your household.
I completely agree with you.
Right.
And that was my biggest fight with Medicare. So I would learn loopholes. I would learn ways to phrase things. Yep. One of the biggest things was be by yourself. Yeah. Truthfully, I would tell people, try not to call on a provider, even though it was dangerous. Try not to call on a provider. Try not to have these services attached to you, because you showing that you have help means that you have help. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to do these things. However, if you're trying to do these things independently, I can use that as justification to purchase your equipment. Right?
So the reality is, though, that when you do have some help, you don't usually have 24-hour help.
Absolutely not, because they won't fund that either.
Right.
So I luckily have been very, very grateful to work with extremely educated therapists who are able to use those phrases and know to show that full 24 hours versus, they're only in a wheelchair for 4 hours a day, but where else are they? Are they in bed? Are they stuck in bed without this wheelchair? Or, how many times a day are they able to transfer out of that because of only having a caregiver 1 hour every day? Okay. So,
have you worked in other states at all, or just Texas?
I've only worked in Texas.
Okay.
I have again, just a very ignorant question for myself. So hypothetically speaking, you'd be talking about Medicare. Say I have a private insurance like Blue Cross Blue Shield. Hypothetically speaking, let's say I walk over whoever set up the rug outside by the entrance and I need a wheelchair. Do they give you any sort of different latitude when it comes to freedom with getting a wheelchair, or do they tell you it's no going to a grocery store, no going outside or living your life?
Typically, they follow Medicare rule. So Medicare writes the standard. The government writes the standard for how all private policies react. So they're going to typically only follow whatever guidelines that Medicare and the government has created.
Doesn't that sound like they're forcing private insurance to not compete with Medicare?
Right.
Top question on that interview that I did with you is what makes a wheelchair cost as much as a Corvette? Because yesterday you were talking about some of like the standard issue ones, like the $3,000 to $7,000 ones that the insurance company try to stick you with. What makes one $65K?
Capability, freedom. If it's good enough to get you outside of your home, it's going to cost more.
Can you give me just some of the subtle differences? Because when you say freedom, what I hear in that range is I can go over a curb, I can go uphill, downhill. Like, give me what other specifics are there? Like the most commonalities that frustrate you if you were in a $3,000 wheelchair.
Right. So in a $3,000 wheelchair, I wouldn't be leaving my home.
And this goes back to what you said yesterday. If you're possible to repeat it today. You were talking about the minimum standard for health that an insurance company, whether it's Medicare or expensive private insurance or mid-range private has insurance, for what they consider acceptable for you. Can you talk a little bit about that bare minimum acceptability for them to consider you're good, we did our job?
So if it's not medically necessary to keep your heart beating, it's not covered.
Now, one of the things that, I may be being silly here, but like one of the things that I need to keep my heart beating is food and water and stuff like that.
Exercise.
And sometimes I have to go outside to get food. So how does that work?
They expect you to be cared for by others.
Wait, now I understand. So Blue Cross Blue Shield, hear me out. They get you a live-in home aid, and they have somebody pay for your food delivery back and forth, and they make it for you. Is that what they do?
They expect your family to do it, which does actually, it wears down the family unit.
Well, again, I don't have as much experience with this because my father got his knees replaced really late. While he was going through a lot of the suffering and pain, you could hear his bones grinding because he had nothing left. He's very stubborn. He still doesn't do wheelchair. He goes through Walmart like he's the Tin Man from Wizard of Oz. He doesn't like the idea of being dependent on anyone. It would kill him inside. There's this fundamental culture in any of the abilities communities of don't help me if I haven't fucking asked you. So the idea that the insurance companies and all their policies go completely fundamentally against the entire culture of the community. I imagine if any of these insurance agents had to spend even 10 minutes living under the standard that they had for you, they would jump off a bridge.
My mother is actually known for telling people like that. An aluminum bat would teach you what it's like.
Aluminum bat?
Yes.
Would she say that while holding the bat?
Yes, she would.
She sounds like an awesome woman. Is she here today?
No, she's not.
I would like an interview with her at some point. Let's get back to that mentality that you were talking about, which is that these companies, if your heart is beating, you're good.
Yep.
So when you talk about this not being waterproof, we're getting better with this with liquid resistance on things, but there are still devices that have no liquid proofing at all. And so, for instance, if a laptop doesn't have it, I'm not saying it's good because IBM figured this out in 2004, but if you're talking about an action camera, a GoPro, stuff like that, there's a fundamental expectation to have some liquid resistance because you're using that outside. Are they just saying you're not allowed to go outside by virtue of this? Because it does rain outside from time to time.
Right. They're saying you don't have to go outside to stay alive.
And again, this kind of goes back to that whole to buy food.
That's the bare minimum. The bare minimum is keeping you alive.
Couldn't it be argued that a wheelchair would not be necessary for that? I mean, realistically speaking, you could just be tied to a bed with an IV. It almost seems like that's the standard for them. It's hard because if you hold them to their own standard, then technically from my point of view, it doesn't sound like they would actually have to provide you with anything at all. It's almost
Sometimes
as if,
they don't.
It's almost as if the wheelchair is like, here, this is a gift so that you can get to the bathroom.
Look, I was advocating for an Army vet a couple of years ago. He endured a 6-week coma over diabetes. The hospital care failed to keep him clean and dry for 6 weeks. He came to from the coma with sepsis so bad that his insurance company paid over $1 million to cut off his legs. Okay, so think about this. The insurance company paid for bad care that caused him to have to lose his legs that they paid $1 million to do. And they turned right around and told him he didn't need a wheelchair. And they did that because there's an allowed 2-year appeals process. Now, he's a legless diabetic. What happens to a legless diabetic who's in bed for 2 years? he died. We're killing people.
Now, one of the things that also bothers me in my industry, I'm kind of curious what the parallels are with it's not even so much them making mistakes. To be clear, obviously the mistakes in your industry and you're a verticalist, there's much greater consequences than in mine. But the thing that kills me is not the mistake, it's the complete lack of accountability, it's the lack of responsibility, it's the gaslighting, it's the you're holding it wrong, it's a few number of people, a small number, all this other bullshit. So what was the liability, the accountability, or the admission of fault from the insurance company in that case?
In the case of him, none. They followed the rules. So that's what happens when you put regulatory systems, bureaucrats, and shareholders in charge of what we need. It's all set to be that way.
What were the rules in this instance? And I understand that I may be getting just a little bit too...
It does vary from state to state, and it does vary from insurance to insurance, but the general rule is it has to be, quote, medically necessary. And that definition changes continually. It changes so often that social workers don't know what people qualify for.
It's just a weird thing. I'm not saying that you should have less, just to be clear, but I'm just trying to demonstrate how ridiculous the insurance company seems to be being here. Medically necessary. I mean, do you technically have to even have this at all? If the concept is that your family is going to be taken care of, your family is going to cook, your family is going to get you food, your family is going to fix whatever's broken in your home, if you're even allowed to have a home under these pieces of shit, would you actually need this? Technically, you could piss in a cup in bed. Technically, you could just shit yourself. I mean, what's wrong with you?
I've actually been in those situations. And the reality is that for a lot of people, particularly if you gain disability,
even just listening to this, my watch is literally telling me my heart rate is abnormal because it's just pissing me off so much listening to this. This is not acting.
I have witnessed people gain a disability and have their families walk away from them. Can you imagine that? But in this case, it is just technology. It is just, I like to say the best way to include those with disabilities is to endow them with what they need to include themselves. I mean, when you go to work, you use a car, right?
Yeah.
Well, imagine if you didn't have a car.
I build an electric bike that blows up and burns my nuts off because I bought batteries from Unipack Power.
Well, there you go.
Or I just don't go to work if I'm in Houston because there is nothing that you could do here if you don't have a car.
Right. And, a lot of people gain a disability and they already have children. They already have a wife. They already have a home. And it is very common for them to lose all of those things.
When you need a repair in your wheelchair, how long does it take?
Just to get the appointment in, it takes about a month.
When you say appointment, do you mean an appointment with the manufacturer, the repair person, the insurance company? What does that look like for you?
Oh, no, that's just a date. Just to put a date on the calendar for me to go.
So where are you going to in that case? Who's the first point of contact when you have a problem?
Can I say the name of the company that I have?
You can say whatever you want.
I went to New Motion. New Motion.
Yep.
I'm from New York. Use any vocabulary you want.
And they suck. I hate them.
Okay, so can you tell me a little bit? I'm just going to put this thing down so I can get a little bit more about your experience with them.
All the locals here in Houston do not go to New Motion.
Same in New York.
Oh, really?
Tell me about New Motion.
First of all, the chair that I'm in currently, it took me a month to get an appointment. Then they rescheduled my appointment or canceled, and then we're not healthy people in wheelchairs, so then I had to cancel. When I finally got in the appointment, there was an RN and a guy measuring me, and the RN kept telling me that I'm a complete injury, and I said, no, all my documents say that I'm incomplete. My spinal cord is not severed.
Just a couple of questions, because my audience, and admittedly myself, are considerably ignorant with this type of stuff. I guess the first one was when you say complete versus incomplete, what is that referring to and what does that mean? And my second one is, what was the problem that caused you to file an appointment to begin with?
I was in a motor vehicle accident, but my spinal cord was not severed, was not cut. So I'm incomplete. Just my nerves don't work. And they had an RN telling me what doctors have been telling me, that they're wrong. Doctors are wrong and she's right.
Wait, so when you say incomplete, what you mean is you're not completely not able?
Yeah, the spinal cord is completely not cut.
Okay, so is this a way of trying to avoid liability where they're saying, because it's not fully cut, well, I guess you don't need this?
I'm assuming that's what she was trying to tell me.
So when you say appointment, was that an appointment to get into the device, or was that an appointment to fix it?
To get measured for a new wheelchair. So, and then the measurements were wrong. My feet, my legs dangle off of this wheelchair. The cushion is not, the seat is not short enough. They just measured me wrong. So the seat is like this, and the back of my legs are so backed up because they made it too long. So the back of my legs are hitting the seat, and that's causing circulation problems right now.
I can see that right here.
Yeah, and so my feet are blue.
Mind if I just see
Cutting
what
off the circulation.
Cutting off your circulation.
Yeah.
Mind if I get a look at that?
Yeah. I can help you out.
Thomas, can you explain to me what it is that I'm looking at here?
All right, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and I hope I don't make you uncomfortable. Do you have sensation in your legs?
No.
Okay. So her spinal cord was not cut, but she is technically paralyzed, right?
Right.
And that's a differentiation that's made by a doctor that an insurance company uses to qualify or disqualify various aspects. But here's the thing. She was talking about being measured for the chair, and they get this wrong all the time, especially with manual chairs, but also with power chairs. You can see right here, her calf is up against the seat. She can't feel her legs, but that's cutting off her circulation.
So you don't even have the ability to have awareness of the health problem that's being caused by it?
Not until she takes off her shoes and looks at her blue feet.
Like, I remember I bought an Aeron chair, and I bought the wrong size. There's size A, B, and C. I was being cheap. I wanted to buy it on eBay, and I saw they had a different size. And it was causing me pain. But if I couldn't feel that pain, I would not adjust my situation.
Right, and not only that, but in this situation, because she can't feel it and it's causing a problem, some people end up with serious problems over there. You can go septic, you can end up with amputation, you can end up in a much worse situation just because they failed to measure it correctly.
I have to get surgery. The blood flow's not going to my legs. I have to get surgery now because the circulation is stopping. Yeah, because of this.
So you have to get surgery as a result of being measured improperly for this product.
Yes.
Now here's my apologies for how ignorant all this stuff is. I'm trying to learn and teach people. When you say they measured you wrong, who does this process? Is it a doctor of your choice? Is it a doctor of the insurance company's choosing? Is it the manufacturer of the wheel?
Whoever is making the custom wheelchair, and to me that was New Motion.
So it's the manufacturer of the wheelchair.
So that they call them providers. New Motion is one of few providers left. After the ACA passed, 75% of providers went out of business.
Now, is this like a Tesla situation where you go to them and they own every place you go to, or is this something like a car dealership where everybody's their own franchise?
So a provider is licensed to do this by the manufacturer.
Okay, so it sounds like you have Ford the company and Ford your dealerships.
It's very simple. It's very similar to the Apple model, right? You have to buy a license to be a repair shop, right?
In theory, I would never be allowed one, but yes, in theory, that's how it works.
Right. So
you have to get certified by them and go through this. Okay, that's interesting. So how are the problems like this solved in general by what it is you're trying to do?
Well, you get to choose yourself. For one, you get to work with people you know and who care about you. Right, so that's the other thing, right?
Somebody recommended.
They put these divisions between you and what you need that removes the care from healthcare, right? I mean, if your community, people who knew you, were actually looking at this and thinking about this with you, that wouldn't happen.
Post your foundation existing, let's say 5 years down the line, you get things set up as much as you'd like to. How would her experience have been different? And tell me what and why of everything.
Right. So with us, ideally, she would be working with a local nonprofit that we facilitate to do this work. And they're already going to care more than someone who's just doing a job, right? And that's what happens. People get into this industry because they care, but then they still need a paycheck, so they're not going to leave the industry once they figure out how bad it is. I've seen ATPs and people working in this industry leave because it got worse, but most of them are going to stay because they still need food on the table. So what we end up with is everybody is captured by this. People who work in the industry don't like how bad it is, and yet they're still there. what else are you going to do when that's all you know?
So in her situation, she would be going to a local nonprofit to get fitted.
And ideally within the community where people already know her. I mean, if you're helping someone you know and it's because you care and not because of a paycheck, then you're going to do a better job. You're going to listen, you're going to communicate, and you're not going to be checking boxes and using a regulatory system to decide what she needs. You're going to be asking her and looking at the situation. You're going to see that her leg is pressed against the seat.
So in addition to working on the open source designs, you also want to be able to create a network so that people can search for a directory of people that are going to care. Kind of like if Yelp wasn't junk, but for people who are looking for these types of products.
We just submitted to Rochester Institute of Technology for them to develop a web portal so that we can network these nonprofits to facilitate better repairs. And once that's done, we want to use that to release our designs.
So once you have that little network of nonprofits, it's going to be easier for you to actually have your own distributor network if you start building up in the beginning.
We are creating a competing supply chain.
By the way, thank you for answering my ignorant questions. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for asking us.
Pleasure meeting you,
To
man.
put you on the spot, but we have to talk about these things. Because if we don't, nobody listens.
Yeah.
I had no idea. 99% of what I'm learning yesterday and today, I would have never known for the rest of my life if I hadn't actually shown up.
Yeah. I even talked to like the president of the company at New Motion. Yeah, I'll call you right tomorrow and we'll talk about this more, and never called back.
Yep.
So I mean, I'm gone
And he's in that same situation though. He has a job, he wants that paycheck, and that's all he cares about. Because he doesn't know you personally. You're not his neighbor, you're not his wife, you're not his daughter, you're not someone he went to school with or someone he plays sports with. You're a number.
Yeah. I think they're interested in the people, from what I noticed, the people that have the big bucks, the people that got that money from whatever settlement they got. So, Medicare.
The failures in these systems are all about greed.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, man.
Okay, so what are the... Hey, it's a pleasure to meet you, my friend. My name's Lewis. Okay, so like, what are the advantages and let's say disadvantages of getting this versus, let's say, what type of traditional device that Thomas has here?
Advantages. One of the advantages is an emotional advantage, eye level. Right now, I'm talking to you eye to eye, face to face. That's important for a lot of people that goes overlooked. And another advantage, high rise stuff. You get 3 or 4 inches, you stuck like Chuck. You can't go nowhere. So this, you can just go down, 4-wheel drive, and you can go over bumps, curbs. You can even go to sand and beaches. So it's all terrain. And then when you're going to the house, going to visit somebody, you can just go all the way down here. And you can maneuver really, really well. So that's another important factor. So there's different settings for different vocations and for different locations. So this is an advantage for other power chairs.
So the other wheelchairs we were looking over there were like $7,000 to $8,000, and the lovely woman there was talking about how difficult it is to get any sort of insurance company, whether Medicare or private insurance, to even give you something like that. They say, if you can get around inside your house, we don't care if you can get to the grocery store, we don't care if you can get to work, that's good enough. Is this solely a private purchase type of thing? If you were to go to an insurance company and say, I want this, do they just laugh you out of the room, or is this something that is covered under certain circumstances?
No, it's definitely a laugh out the room situation. I have dealt with insurance companies. I'll give you a personal story of my own. I needed a shower chair in order to properly take a shower so I wouldn't bump my head and stuff. But they consider it a luxury, not a necessity. That hurts a lot because when I'm trying to take a shower just like everybody else, I can't. I can slip on water, I can bust my head open, and they're going to tell me it's a luxury, not a necessity. So that's one thing. So as long as you can get around, period, they don't care how you get around. They just want you to get around. They don't care if you're comfortable. They don't care if you're happy. They don't even care if you're doing it real well. They just say, okay, we gave you a wheelchair, make it work.
Were you born in Texas, my friend?
Yes, sir. Houston, Texas, Cypress area.
Yeah, I could tell because I was born in New York, so when you said something, my first word I thought you were going to come and say is that's bullshit, but yeah. Manners. I'll try to emulate you while I'm here.
If whatever they don't have to do, they won't do. They won't take the extra mile. They won't try to work with you, make a deal. So I would say that that's right. The government does set the standard, and sometimes even these businesses, the people that own them, they're going to do the bare minimum to get money, and to line their own pockets while cutting out everybody else. If it loses money, they ain't interested.
How does the American Mobility Project work with regards to getting a gentleman like you into this amazing chair?
Well, it all started at this expo. I actually talked to Mobius Mobility, the manufacturers, at a booth, and I asked them, "Hey, I want this chair. I can't afford it. Not really. I don't really have a lot of money." And they said, "Hey, we know somebody. We're gonna set you over to the American Mobility Project. Write them a letter and tell them your situation." I took the time, wrote them a letter, and they accepted it within like couple of weeks. And it was like, "Yes, we love your story. We voted on you, and like, yes, you are a recipient, and we will get you this chair," and which changed my life for all the good reasons. Independent people is mostly made up of people who have lost something. I know Gary, he lost his legs. He was a helicopter pilot. He used to fly. He was in war zones. He was a soldier, so he lost his legs, and he saw somebody unable to do something. It was like, I want to do something about that. He picked a new war to fight rather than retire, which he had the right to. He already had a chair. He already had everything that he needed. But he said, no, I'm going to help people. So he started this organization. Now it benefits people like me who don't have much. So yes, people want them, but it's such high maintenance for it to make. They can't just sell them by nickels on the dime. At least not yet. So that's all I know about it. They can, if they would, they could, but they can't. It costs so much to make, and the demand is not necessarily high. Like a lot of, they consider it a luxury item. This is like a Ferrari.
Some of the people in my audience, they were saying, how can a wheelchair cost as much as a Corolla? This is not what they have in mind when they're thinking of it. This is amazing.
Because like, how can you tell people if you're not in that situation that it's a luxury, not a necessity? You're not in that situation, and how are you have the right to represent me? When I'm like this, when I'm the one that has to do this, I could easily bust my head, and then my mom's in even more pain. We already in pain. I was hit at 84 miles an hour. She was in pain because of all the trauma and all the surgery I had to go through. So why would you want to make her life even more hectic? It affects the family unit. It tears apart the family unit. We're already grieving. Now you want to nickel and dime us. Now you want to make stuff harder for us. You want more money out of us. It's just not right, period. That's all I got to say about that.
It was a pleasure meeting you, my friend. Thank you so much for taking the time and humoring all of my ignorant questions.
So Mark's a mission partner of ours, and he's developing an app to network accessibility and the things you can do as a disabled person. Like, because it can be hard to find things that are very accessible and activities. And so he's trying to make sure that everybody has access to all that information. He shares right here. That's it. That's a chair developed to go on the beach.
Okay, yesterday you have the iBot, the thing that stands up. You have a wheelchair for the beach. So this is a beach wheelchair?
Wait, how are you supposed to do it like this? No.
Okay, so I see. So the wheels are kind of like a little bit balloony.
This is what I would do.
I know, that's what I would
You
do.
have to figure out how to make
Okay,
this.
I am assuming that it's stupid that I'm even asking this question, so feel free to tell me. That's not something that the insurance company is going to cover. So if they're not even willing to cover the wheelchairs that allow you to get out of your house.
Most of this equipment here is a luxury for a lot of people that insurance will not cover.
Yeah, I was talking to Thomas Queter of Mobility Independence Foundation, a woman at Sunrise Medical, and she was saying that they don't consider it medically necessary for you to be able to get in the shower. They don't consider it medically necessary for you to be able to go to a grocery store. It's absolutely insane.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I imagine that if any of these people had to live by their own standard for 3 hours, they would lose their mind.
I wish. My biggest thing is you get these politicians to sit in a wheelchair and feel what it's like to not be able to access a building or Washington, D.C. or any of these things. They would change their minds, just to experience what we go through. And, we live in your world, you don't live in ours. So they don't understand what it's like to not be able to get into a restaurant, get into a hotel. I've been dealing things with here this week, at the Hyatt. It's a brand new Hyatt. accessibility issues that they just built. Like the engineers and designers are not thinking about the future in certain aspects.
Tell me if I'm wrong here, because I'm ignorant of all this. I'm a repair technician, and I just got into this because Thomas was talking about how difficult it is to fix wheelchairs, the same way I talk about how difficult it is to fix motherboards. What do you think makes more sense? Making wheelchairs like that can just get around this type of stuff, and having insurance cover wheelchairs that are more designed for the real world?
I think they should try to make everybody have the accessibility that leggies have, that everybody that can walk around have. And, you know, I realize that a lot of these things, they're not going to pay for it. Like that beach seat is not a necessity. Some of the sleeping items or the shocking treatments and stuff like that, they're not going to cover. But that's why this expo is so great. It puts together so many different things, and people can see it and they go, hey, we could save our money, or we could try to get that, or get a sponsorship, or, you know, I can bring my buddy in, Mark, he can tell his story here. So it's great that this expo can do that, but it's not enough. It's far from even coming close to what we are the biggest minority in the world, and we have the smallest voice. So it's important to have these, especially when you come here. You know, in my life, wherever I go, I'm stared at, no matter what, in the room, in whatever. You know, I played college football, I played minor league baseball like this. I've always been stared at, but here, everybody's the same. Nobody's staring at each other. Nobody's different. It's you guys that are like the outsiders that were like, oh, you can be tall.
Yeah, my father had 2 knee replacements, and he's had 7 surgeries on his joints. He was a chef, so he had to stand up all day. So for his shoulders, he had to be doing this all day. And for his knees, it was constant this, that, back and forth. So he's had 7 surgeries on his joints. And the one thing I learned from him from an early age is the meanest, nastiest, crappiest thing that you could do to anybody, like not even stare, try to help.
Yeah.
Like you know it.
Yeah, I mean, people mean well, but my philosophy is I like to open my own doors, and I mean that. Like, I like to go and open the doors for people. People they feel sorry for you, but my life, I've been about teaching empathy instead of sympathy. So it's like, instead of how can I help you, how can I help you get a job? How can I help you go to class? How can I help you get a better education? That's the help that the disabled world needs.
I had no idea that so many really interesting products like this exist, or the iBot where you could stand up and everything. And I'm just kind of wondering, as technology moves on, if this gets more affordable, and more importantly, if insurance companies actually start giving a shit about about you guys instead of the bottom line for their shareholders. Would you even need as many of the ADA accessible things in buildings when you have stuff like this? Like, this seems like it's...
You wouldn't, but the problem with, especially on the East Coast, that you sound like you're from the East Coast.
Don't hold it against me too much.
Well, you know everything.
I apologize ahead of time.
They have the grandfather clauses, so they don't have to fix this stuff because it's a historic building, or, Helen Keller slept here, or something stupid,
Nobody has the money for that. That's the problem. Like, the building that I was in was built in I believe the 1910s. And
I didn't have electricity.
It was like I was paying $3,500 a month for rent. When I first got this place, I had $2,000 or $3,000 in the bank. If somebody said I had to rebuild this step, so I put a little ramp out front. And anytime somebody needed, I wouldn't say I'll help you, but I would just show up and say, hey, how's it going? Let me see what you got, and I'll let you decide whether or not you want some.
It's like my hotel. I specifically on my reservation said I don't want an adaptive room. I don't like getting in those stand-up showers. I'm on the ground. I don't want to sit in filth. The guy changed it while I was at the desk and didn't tell me. I go to the room. It's an accessible room. So I went back down, brought my luggage, and I said, hey, I think somebody screwed up. I explicitly said I did not want. And he's like, oh, that's on me. And I'm like, well, I understand that it's a great idea, but I said it's okay to ask. Just ask. It's not upsetting. We understand. Just ask.
Yeah, I think it's weird when it comes to these things. There's this assumption that they're the first person that did that, so you shouldn't expect it kind of thing.
No, everybody thinks, they ask me, they assume it was war, and then they're embarrassed because they always say thank you for your service, and I've got to go, I didn't serve. I was born this way. And then they're like, oh, I don't want them to not respect people in the future, but it's like, it's easier to say, hey, how did that happen, rather than assuming that it's a military type thing. So.
It was a pleasure speaking to you, my friend.
Yeah, thanks.
There was a lot of these initiatives, particularly in New York City, try to get buildings that are 100 or 200 years old, that are rented by broke people that can barely pay their bills, to make the building as ADA compliant as possible. If insurance companies were actually willing to spend the money so that people could get iBots and stuff like this, would that be as important? Or in
So that's exactly what our initiative is. We're trying to make a chair that's more capable, so all these ADA violations don't matter so much.
me personally, if I had to choose, again, I'm not in your position, so tell me if this is inappropriate. If I had to choose between trusting that the world actually did things to code or just give me some shit like this, I would choose the shit like this.
Right. So the example I like to use, upstate New York, there's a lot of ground heat every winter, right? So every parking lot becomes an ADA violation every year. We could technically sue them all every year to repave their parking lot. But then you end up with a lot of empty buildings that are accessible.
I have never looked into the figures, but the amount of money that it would take to retrofit all these buildings to be ADA versus the amount of money it would cost to give you this instead of that on wheels, which I imagine if the insurance company had their say, you would get that on 4 fucking chair wheels to an Amazon chair.
Yeah. I mean, look, technology solves the problem better than regulation. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
If you can get over that pothole, you don't have to worry about there being a pothole.
I would rather the money be spent on this type of stuff.
The solutions to all of these problems are, especially today versus the 1980s when the ADA was passed, the solution does not have to be forcing everybody to make their property accessible. The solution has to be technology that doesn't have to worry about accessibility.
Yeah.
So one thing that I've noticed, this is my first time in Texas. So talking to individuals, in New York, the average wait time for a custom power chair is about 2 years.
327.
Here, I'm hearing it's about a year.
Sounds like the wait time to get a license renewed.
Right,
or an
but here
audit
it's
done.
about a year.
See, my thing
So
that's the difference in states handling their Medicaid and Medicare differently.
I'm happy that it's half the time. That's awesome.
Right,
I'm
but it's still
unhappy
a
that
year.
it's. How are you supposed to wait a year to live your life?
Well, I agree. I agree that you shouldn't have to wait a year.
Sir,
How you doing?
it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Lewis.
Lewis, very
I've heard
nice
a lot
to
of
meet
amazing things about you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so like
That's right.
from
It's all
my
lies if it's coming from him.
When I met him, he was carrying his leg. Can you tell him why?
Why was they carrying my leg?
Yeah, you were in the manual chair and you were what, uncomfortable with the fit?
Yeah, well, not just the fit. I think my battery died.
Oh.
I think my charger was broke, and I might have been swollen from wearing it for too long.
you don't have to
That's
charge
what you're
that.
talking about.
You
Yeah,
don't
you
have to charge
gotta
that.
Yeah, you gotta charge it right here. It's a magnetic charger.
Oh, okay. So it is. Wow. This is over the past 10 years. All these companies make it as difficult as possible to be able to fix what you own. So
They do that in the car industry too.
Yeah, well, a lot of the car industry. What I realized is the more I went on talking about it in my industry, the more I realized it exists in every industry. Tractors, wheelchairs. I would show up to these hearings and I would see people talking about how their wheelchair is equally as inaccessible as my stuff. So we got a bill passed in Colorado trying to help make parts available so you're not stuck waiting for repairs. And he wanted to make open source wheelchairs.
More than wheelchairs. We're getting requests for everything from walkers to canes, you name it, because there's so many problems in the system. A gentleman that we actually work with, his daughter has a disability and she's growing. So the walker she's using is now too short for her, but they won't qualify her for the next size up until she's tall enough. And that means she has to spend that time growing, being uncomfortable and potentially hazardous until they approve her for the next size walker.
The idea of open source wheelchairs appeals to me because then you don't have to worry about somebody else limiting your ability to fix things. However, from everything that I'm hearing from all these manufacturers, and I don't know if they're telling the truth or full of it, is that most of the problems with repairability is not the proprietary nature of the wheelchair, it's that Medicare as well as private insurers are equally horrible with regards to anything that you need. Where does open source wheelchairs come into play, or open source equipment like this in general, to try and fix these problems?
Yeah, it's a necessity. Just only being able to be repaired at one location, and that's the individual selling it, right? Like, so, you know, for that to happen, that monopoly, if they're the only ones that can fix it.
Cronyism.
Yeah, cronyism.
So is the idea here not even about dealing with insurance, it's just I want the ability to pay for this repair and for it to be affordable. So like if my power button dies, instead of having to wait 6 months to go through Medicare, if this is open source, I can buy a power button or buy a, I don't know, like the Sidewinder joystick thing that you've got going on here.
$3.
I love the Sidewinder joystick that you put on here. This thing's awesome.
Just $20.
This reminds me of my play in Need for Speed 2 on my Pentium 2.
Oh man, I miss that game.
Huh?
I miss that game.
Me too.
A lot of it stems from, as a community, we're not together, right? And if we can get together and then we can agree on that, we can start making the demands more into the community and into the individuals providing these products to make it accessible to us to repair ourselves. Just like you said, it does take 6 to 8 weeks because you can only use this one company to fix your chair. but there's other people that are qualified and able to fix it in a week. So now instead of being 6 weeks or 8 weeks down because you're waiting for, again, Medicare, Medicaid, or an insurance company to approve it. So what happens after waiting 6 weeks and they don't approve it? Then you got to reapply or do something and wait another 6 weeks, and then you're going to go out and find it and repair it anyways. So if it was accessible and easy for us and the technology was available to us to fix it or to utilize other people, things could happen quicker, faster, and cheaper. So it might be done specifically by design so they can justify the cost of insurance and justify the cost of these pieces of equipment.
Like, what are some of the common things that break on these that you would want fixable by your own technician?
So the best example I can give you is this seat cushion.
Okay.
Under insurance, this flat rectangular cushion.
Wait, should I brace myself for you to tell me how much that thing costs?
Yes.
Wait, okay, so 1 second. Let me just move the camera thing so that I can still get a view after I fell down. Just change my head. Okay.
So under insurance, this flat rectangular cushion is considered custom. Custom.
You're scaring me. You're using the words right now that are going to mean that this... Okay,
yes.
Can I guess?
Yeah, how much do you think this cost the last time I got one through insurance?
Okay, 3 guesses and tell me if I'm cold or warm.
Okay.
$129.
Low.
$1,000.
Low.
You're fucking kidding me.
The last time...
5,000.
High.
2,000.
Low.
What the Okay, I get
So the last time that I got this through insurance, the number they put on the piece of paper they mailed me was $2,400. So this is not something you could just buy pre-made off the rack. It has to be custom made. Basically, you have to buy a piece of foam.
You can't go to Sleepy's and buy
you have to cover it. So through insurance, the number they put on when they tell you what they paid for it is $2,400.
Oh, that's the number they say they paid for.
Which, who knows? Do you know what I paid for it? I bought the materials directly from the company, same materials.
$149?
$30. So the reason they call this custom is because you can't just buy one off the shelf. But you could buy the materials off the shelf and put it together for $30.
So the $30, that was not including the assembly?
Well, my mother is a seamstress, so she sewed the cover.
So the $2,370 is the assembly. What are the other repairs that are common for you where an open source wheelchair would allow a quick one and having to go through Medicare and Medicaid would drive you insane?
Right. So with our initiative, open source, we're looking at off-the-rack components from other industries. And the best example is actually the tires.
Like, what is it that breaks most often, I guess is my question, where you're crap, that thing again, I don't want to go through insurance?
And tires. I wear through tires about every 18 months.
How much time does that take through insurance? How much does it cost you through insurance? And how much would it cost you? Above all, since it's a tire, can't anybody make that shit? When I think open source, I'm thinking to replace something. I'm thinking proprietary source code to software. I'm thinking proprietary inner soul chip. I can't just go anywhere and have somebody fabricate a chip like that. But tires,
these are dirt bike tires. It cost me like $30 a piece.
Okay, so let's say one of those right there, like any standard wheelchairs. If that guy wants tires, how much time are you looking at waiting? Broad range. If somebody says, "Hey, listen, the treads are bad on my tires. I got a flat."
I've waited months.
Months.
Yep.
So I imagine what you're making.
These particular tires, I ordered them on a Friday and I received them on a Monday and they were installed on a Tuesday.
You were talking about the
HID, Human Interface Device.
Okay, this is the type of stuff that I kind of understand.
So you might have about the same wait time as tires for an HID because they're pre-built and they're sitting on a shelf and they're off the rack. But they're also garbage, right? This is not ours. This is one we've repaired. It's not waterproof. This wheelchair is built to go outside, but the controller is not waterproof.
So you're saying somebody from Apple designed this?
I'm saying somebody who's just as greedy designed it. So this is not the original joystick, which is part of the HID. The original joystick, which it's got a gimbal that goes below it, it's how it reads where you're pushing it. The original had 2 copper conductors wrapped in resistor wire, and each one had a pin that ran along it, one this way and one this way, and that's how it could tell which direction you were pushing it in. And the resistor wire on one of those copper rods had frayed, no longer worked. We contacted Penny and Giles, which is a foreign company with different IP law, to not to get the part, not to get it fixed, not to get a replacement, not to get their full schematics. We asked them for enough information to figure out how to drop something off the rack in.
Oh gosh.
And they told me to throw my otherwise working $65,000 wheelchair away
And then you'll see the big
and get a
chair,
new one.
you'll see
No, so look, everybody's trying to innovate. Everybody's trying to create good equipment. But often it's able-bodied people creating the equipment, and they're not trying to see it from that perspective. So they're looking at, no offense to your company, your product, and definitely not to you personally, because I love you guys. The problem is that they're looking at what can we create that we think is good for someone in a disability situation, and they're not disabled. I mean, you're not, right? No, I mean, you're ambulatory, right?
That's the worst insult I've ever heard somebody deliver.
What? That you're ambulatory?
No, when you said you're not disabled.
Right.
I heard it with I heard the condemnation.
Right. So the point is, we often end up with people who are ambulatory or not disabled, trying to create what they think we need, because the bare minimum is so commonly low. As I was about to tell you, I was talking to 3 people with my condition, and they were in what I consider to be pretty poor quality wheelchairs. And I asked them what they do and what they'd like to do that they're not doing, and that led to, do you go in your own yard? And their response was, no, I didn't even want to. Right?
What kind of question is that, though?
Right. I mean, do you want to go in your own yard?
I would like to.
Right. I mean, imagine coming up through the world in a situation where you decide that going in your own yard is not worth doing.
What is the use case for this over the junk that Medicare would give you that doesn't really allow you freedom?
So this device, this is the Tech RMD. So we're Maintain Mobility. This is the Tech RMD. This lets folks with like paraplegia or spinal cord injury.
So you said Tech RB?
Tech RMD.
Tech RMD, okay.
RMD, robotic mobilization device. So this lets folks with like paraplegia or spinal cord injury, whatever mobility issue, take themselves from seated up to standing and then be independently cruising around at a natural standing face-to-face height. So it's sort of in between like a standing frame, which is like a big clunky thing where you're stuck in one spot for 3 hours a day or whatever, and a power chair where you're cruising around but you can't stand and you're stuck looking up at everything. So this lets people go from seated, which would be lower than this. So you board it from like this position, like sit on the seat cushion, bring the belts in, and then stand with it. And then from there, like, yeah, we can't do a 6-inch curb in this one, but most places you can find a way around that.
Are you ready for a really stupid question?
If you're ready for a really stupid answer.
How many insurance companies will cover somebody getting this?
So right now we're starting to get some headway with insurance companies. We've had a lot of trouble with insurance companies covering it because they're not sure.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, exactly. They're not sure if it's a standing frame or a power chair, and the answer is it's the best parts of both, but it's not really either.
Now, one of the things that he's been telling me about that's been just fundamentally the most offensive, not about you, just about the entire state of affairs, was the minimum medical necessity that they would consider with regards to covering somebody. Whether you have Medicare, Medicaid, or you have the most expensive private insurance there is. Mm-hmm. They were saying the bare minimum necessary to live, but by their standard, it doesn't even seem like they think you should have a chair at all. I need to leave my house to get food in order to eat so I can live. There are so many things that require I get around.
Yep.
It almost seems like they're saying we're generous by even giving you this thing.
Yeah, I can say that we've had a lot of frustration like trying to get people into these machines because insurance companies, they don't want to cover this stuff because they're not sure how it affects people. And the reality is like everyone needs to stand. Like we're evolved to stand. Like everything is evolved to be vertical. Like your blood circulation, your digestion system, your bone density maintenance, like all of that requires standing. Everyone's evolved to be like vertical, right? Like preferably standing. Fair, okay. Exceptions exist. Fair enough. And they're not sure, like, should we cover this? Do we not want to cover this? So we've had to, like, uphill battle with, like, look, if you cover this for people, you don't have to cover the $160,000 house remodel to get all the countertops in the kitchen lowered, all the appliances lowered, all the upper cupboards brought down so you can reach them. Get one of these machines and you can reach all those upper cupboards, like, naturally.
And
You can do it
what are the price
independently.
ranges of these? I realize there's going to be different configurations, different everything for people, just like approximate.
These go for anywhere from like $25,000 to $30,000. So expensive, but like on the scope of like medical devices, these are extremely like affordable.
Now, with regards to the type of terrain that you can go over, do you have different solutions for somebody who's more going through conferences versus, I don't know, your going through the woods machine, the hiking thing that you have here? Like, what are the types of terrain that you can go over on these?
So with this one, this is more. So this device here with the solid foam tires, solid foam 8-inch tires in the front and then solid casters in the rear. This is indicated for indoor use by the FDA. So we can use this in houses and event spaces and whatever controlled environment type space. We've had folks use them out and about in the world, but it's indicated for indoor use only by the FDA. We do have, so this guy right there, it's the same device. It's just got these larger front tires and the larger tail. That's our outdoor kit. Basically, it's an optional adder that comes with those wheels that just bolt on and the tail that just slots in and a jack stand to pop it up.
If you don't care about getting your floors of your house dirty or whatever from going outside, is there any particular thing that this cannot do or doesn't do well that this does? Or is it just, if I have the money, I want to get this one?
So you can get both, is the answer. You can get both. That's just an adder kit, right? So that's an extra $4,000. So that brings the 25,000 that the base model costs up to about 30. Yeah, so if you want that, you just get extra wheels and a jack stand. But the difference is this one is a lot more compact, a lot more narrow. So this one's 16.5 wide, that one's 23 inches wide. So if you're going through doorways, like in a house that's supposed to be ADA compliant, they're supposed to be at least 30-inch wide doorways, right? Or 33 inches if you're really smart. Good, they need to. But yeah, so something like this, 16.5 inches, you're not going to be banging up all those door jambs if you're driving something like this. Something like that, yes, you can use it indoors, but you got to be a little more careful with like going through those doorways.
Oh, because the wheels are sticking out further on that one.
Exactly.
From my view, the frame looked the same, but I wasn't thinking about the wheels.
That's the outdoor model, right?
Yep.
Is it waterproof?
So it is water resistant. I think it's IPX4 is the official rating.
Right, so if you get caught in a downpour,
if you get caught in a downpour, you're not going to be happy anyways. But yes, you might encounter some problems. Everything critical is sealed up, but we do have some connections that are more like, don't spray water directly on it and you'll be fine. Cross your finger style.
Well, the thing is, with a lot of those standards like IP67, 68, everything else, a lot of it is related. Is it being rained on, or are you being submerged, and how much can you be submerged? Can it go to 6 feet, 18 feet, 50 feet? And I imagine once you've been submerged 18 feet, you have some serious other problems.
well, personally, I float upside down, so.
Hey, listen, sir, thank you so much for answering a lot of my ignorant questions. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Absolutely.
Look at the front of this chair. You see that orange spring?
Yeah.
Is there anywhere for that spring to go? Is there any travel in that spring? But look, it's already compressed. Once you sit in that, there's not going to be any more compression left. How is that going to absorb any shock?
It doesn't look like it would work. It seems like the Nike Shox shoes and the other copycats that got released in like the late 90s, early 2000s that every kid got, because they cost $50 more than everybody else's shoes, but it was a total gimmick. Is that the case here?
That's what it looks like to me, because I can't imagine that actually creating any suspension.
It looks really cool though, and it's the color red.
That's very common in the industry, is suspension that doesn't actually actuate. I mean, if your springs don't compress, what good is it?
You're like the anti-salesman. I love it.
I am. Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Give me a tour. Hey, how's it going?
Doing all right.
Pleasure to meet you.
Curious, where's the suspension in your model? I mean, how does it actually make itself to ride?
We're mainly focused on lightweight models. Our entire objective is to make it easy, put in your car, easy to transfer, or take to a baseball game, take to a park.
Right. So if you're going to a park, there's going to be bumps.
Yeah.
Where's the suspension?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So we're more focused on the lightweight aspect of it as compared to.
How much weight does the suspension add? I'm totally ignorant. I'm just a repairman.
What'd you say?
I'm totally ignorant. By the way, I'm Lewis. I'm just a repair person. That's how I met Thomas here.
Yeah.
How much weight does a suspension add for something like this?
Lucia might have a better answer to something like that.
So like I appreciate the lightweight aspect of it because it makes it a little bit more portable if you're taking it around with other people. But like, how much weight would a suspension add when you're talking about making it more usable for the average terrain? We've been talking about the insurance companies and how low the standards are for what is medically necessary. And a lot of it is you don't even need to be able to leave your house.
Exactly.
So like really all of these are obviously way better than that. But then he's kind of like nitpicking on the small details. Like, how do I get over bumps here? How do I actually move around?
Yeah.
And one of the things he's been saying is that like 99% of the people who are designing these, for lack of a better way to put it, not using them.
Yeah, they're able-bodied, right? So the suspension on this chair weighs about 10 pounds total. And it's air ride. Yeah. It's air ride, right? So it would be easy to put a suspension on this that weighed maybe 4 or 5 pounds. A couple of springs. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that was kind of the number that I was looking for when I said like plus 50%. So like when you said 5 or 10 pounds, like that gives me an idea. If a suspension added 100 pounds, I see how that's no longer a lightweight wheelchair. But if the idea is going for like the most lightweight wheelchair
that's
possible,
really our objective.
So
we're looking for something you can easily put in your car, lift it up. Sell mainly to elderly people, and so they can't lift a lot of weight. And so when we tell them that this one is 10 pounds lighter than this one, it actually does make a difference.
Yeah, honestly, even the
do elderly people not have to go over bumps?
No, they do, but that's the lightweight aspect of it.
If you go over small bumps, it's really just meant for just traveling and kind of
It's meant to be assisted. Let's be honest.
What'd you say?
It's meant to be assisted. Let's be honest. You're not going to get around most sidewalks comfortably with this.
Not huge curves or anything like that. No.
Not even small sidewalk bumps. Trust me, I know. And I'm sorry to put you guys in the spot. I mean, I'm guessing that you don't have to rely on these yourselves.
Right.
You don't have that perspective, do you? So the reality is that when we design this tech, we need to actually think about it from the perspective of those who use it, and not from those who are trying to solve a problem they don't understand. Right? So I'm a disabilities advocate for 26 years now, and what I hear most often from people is, I'd like to be able to leave my home.
Thomas has no choice. I love it.
For the value of suspension for people who are elderly and have arthritis and hip problems and knee problems, I don't think a few pounds is that big of a difference. Because it's either a few pounds or you're in pain for the whole time that you use it.
In your opinion, is that a saving money thing, or we legit just never didn't think of this because...
The latter. And the people we were talking to were not...
It doesn't seem like a money thing. It's insanely expensive, it is. It really does seem to be... People like you are not making this. Yeah. Having somebody like me make this after fixing MacBooks for 15 years.
If that.
No offense to myself, but I would have no idea to build this.
Right, just like I said, I don't know how to build a rocket ship. Don't ask me to build a rocket ship. So when there's 6 wheels on a chair, that's 2 casters in the back and 2 in the front, that often means that you're going to end up in terrain that will lift the drives up off the ground. At that point, you're stranded.
Tell me what the purpose in general, like what's the idea behind a 6-wheel chair? Like, pretend I know nothing about this.
I think they're trying to make it look like it's more safe. But it's really not. You don't need 6 wheels for it to be safe.
So what is what are the consequences if somebody used this versus something like what you have?
Well, the consequence between this and that is that that's not going to go over terrain. Your drive wheel has the higher height, right? And your bumps are limited by that mid measurement on the wheel.
Okay, so you can't go over a bump that's larger than that because the wheels that are the large wheels are in the middle.
Right.
So how do you get around on that if you're not on a flat floor? To my knowledge, that would mean that you can't go over...
Right. So a wheel is kind of like this, right? And that midline height is the maximum bump you're going to be able to climb.
So can you just demonstrate for me over here a little bit? So how high a bump could this go over? Also, is that suspension looks like a real one over there.
Kind of. So
you have high standards, sir.
I do, because I believe in being active and living a life.
And you should have high standards.
Everyone should. You see the small wheels, half of the height of that small wheel is the maximum bump that will climb.
So that is going to... I mean, I have cracks around the cement by my backyard that are larger than that.
Yeah. Can you imagine going through the sidewalks in New York City in this?
Oh, dear God.
Right?
Yeah, that would not work.
How many people live in New York City?
8.5 million, probably 8.3 now around
and
there.
Roughly 15% of them have a disability, and about 5 to 7.5% of those will be physical. I think they're trying to they're painting a picture of safety that doesn't exist. It's just the same thing.
I'm sorry.
That's almost just a rebranded of the Majestic frame we're looking at. I mean, look at it. Technologically speaking.
Amscope, Amano, I wound up getting them from just some random factory in China, and they make everything. So I can request really small changes. I want the port for the camera at the top to have a particular lens adapter for it so it's clearer, but for the most part it's the same shit. And is that the same thing here where
Often enough.
I mean, that looks pretty damn similar.
Right. I mean,
or is it just them using, is that like a standard shock? Because that does not look like it's going to do anything. Like that shock is like for running over a cockroach.
You ever notice how when McDonald's comes out with a new burger, Burger King comes out with a new burger, and they'll be similar?
Yeah, probably made by the same poison factor.
They're competing with the same marketing.
Who is it? I think that's like Cisco that makes 90% of the food for all these different restaurants.
Right. So I mean, if you need to compete with something, you usually try to follow it in some way.
All of your designs that you make, any of this open source stuff, all of this is going to be kept in mind, even for the, like, let's say, the more affordable models.
Yeah.
It all has to be freedom based. I need to be able to get around. I need to be able to get over these bumps in the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Because I see you got shocks, but they're horizontal.
So you see what they did with the front wheels on this one? They're a little higher up.
Uh-huh.
They're not sitting on the ground. Remember what I told you about that mid wheel being the max bump, right? So by raising this up, that can now climb something higher.
So he has a point. These people really are trying to do it right.
Right, but it's made hard for them, difficult. Because, I mean, would you make a product you can't sell?
No, but it seems like the others are making products that make your life more difficult and they sell anyway. Am I right?
Well, they sell anyway because of insurance or cost.
One of the things I noticed that you lifted them a little bit off the ground so that you could actually get over. Yes, you can actually go over bumps, and I noticed that some of the others here have not.
Yep. Yeah, that helps. And this is only required for clients that are over 200 pounds. Under 200, they go away. Yeah.
No, I'm about 250.
Okay, yeah, so those go away for that.
Is that covered by insurance?
And it's not.
Right, and that's an upsell that has to be paid by the user.
That's right.
Doesn't seem like insurance cares about quality of life at all for anybody.
Don't put me on film saying that.
You didn't say that. You didn't say a word, sir.
I mean, the whole industry is built around medical necessity. And what insurance companies find that's medically necessary is way different than what clinicians and what we would think as people with disabilities would think. And so so that new Outback four-wheel drive chair, it's not going to be a covered item, but it is something that will make a difference for a lot of people that have land and want to be able to get out and go see their property.
So, that looks like something where, I wouldn't have to tell somebody, oh, you need help over this bump in my backyard kind of thing. And his whole thing is how so many of these don't really allow you true freedom. But something like that looks like it does allow you true freedom.
Yeah, and your chair does.
Yeah. So when I was a kid in physical therapy, I had a PT that he pointed at me. He said, "Find your independence, or else you'll end up in an institution."
Oh, jeez.
And he was right.
Yeah.
And I run into people who are afraid or even complacent about going in their own backyard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You get stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's amazing.
With our technological capabilities today, do you think that's appropriate?
Yeah, and it is sad because Medicare has kind of set the standards of what the shower chairs can be. Yeah. And so they make chairs that fall into those codes for indoor use.
Yep.
So all the manufacturers are trying to fall within that guideline, but also create something that will provide some kind of mobility outdoors as well. Right. And they all do pretty good, but not great. Pretty good. Not great, not even real good.
Yeah, I mean, so pretty good is like a measurement of standard based on perspective.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's all because of this same medical necessity dictated by Medicare. How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
Do you think it's right that certain people are being forced to lose out?
Yeah. We got to play by the rules. I don't like it. Yep. None of the clinicians that work in this industry, I'm an occupational therapist, and none of the clinicians that work in the industry agree with it at all. But we're just trying to do the best we can within, the rules that have been placed before us. But yeah, I think our whole healthcare system needs to be completely overhauled.
Thank you. You're the first person to be honest and not defensive. I really appreciate it.
Oh, good. Yeah, no.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah, it's great to meet you. It was nice to meet you.
You as well. Tom Queter.
Great to meet you, Tom. All right. Y'all take care.
So, and that points it out. The rules that oversee their industry are part of the problem.
Explain to me a little bit more. Because I understand how the rules make it more difficult for them to be able to get you a wheelchair that you're covered, but explain to me what you mean in this, more specifically in this instance.
So he just pointed out that the products that they develop have to fit Medicare's code.
They dictate some of the designs.
They dictate what you can get, yeah. They dictate whether or not it's good enough for you.
I imagine the people dictating that are not the ones using it.
No, they're politicians.
The worst kind of people.
Yeah, politicians and their staffers, and again, that comes down to, people who are able-bodied making the decisions for people who are not. They don't have the perspective. They don't understand it. I want to show you something.
Even if I hit him, it would be okay.
So good. Yeah, so we talk about stability, right? The frame on this actuates, right? You're going to want to walk around the chair after I get my wheel up on this. Now I want you to go around the chair and look at all the wheels. Tell me which ones are off the ground, which ones are not touching.
The only one not touching the ground is the one in the orange.
But it's touching something.
Yeah, every one of your wheels is touching something. And also this one, since the weight is being shifted over to the right, but it doesn't seem like the stress is bothering it at all.
Right. So
this is built for actual freedom.
Yes.
See, again, when you think about all these ADA regulations and everything else that are costing tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars, if that money were actually put into simply making like this, do you want to spend all this money remaking the world, or do you want to just give people what they actually need to be able to deal with the world as it is?
And so now this company over here, as the gentleman pointed out, they're beholden to making sure their product can sell to insurance, which is not selling to the user. The other product over there where I got a little too critical, right? They're just trying to fill a gap as best as they can. And they're probably a private pay situation, right? Lightweight, cheaper, more people can afford it. So you're stuck with overregulated garbage or unregulated garbage, and you don't get anything in between. Do you remember Christopher Reeves when he hurt himself on horseback? I was very upset as a child when he gave a press statement afterwards, right? He came out on stage, he had a fancy wheelchair, he had all the gadgets he needed, and he stated something to the effect that it's a wonderful world where all people with disabilities have access to the equipment they need. He had millions of dollars. He didn't need to rely on Medicare or Medicaid.
So this would be like Jeff Bezos living in a mansion somewhere in Michigan where they have lead in the pipes and him drinking water from his fountain and saying, tastes fine to me, kind of thing?
Sort of, yeah.
Anyway, pleasure seeing you again, sir. Thank you very much.
Well, I hope you learned something. This was a really fun conference to go to, and I hope that this gives you a little bit of insight into another world where you have a lot of the same principles, a lot of the same things, a lot of the same, you don't really have control over what you bought and paid for. The entire system for you to be able to get access to it is often monopolized and gate-kept in certain ways, and above all, how people can make it better. I like people like Mr. Thomas Queter because instead of just talking about it and then, quitting, one of the things he always says is, I'm Thomas Queter and I'm no quitter, is that he's actually trying to be a part of the change he wants to see in the world.